right. Well, welcome and welcome back to another Do Good Better live stream webinar with the Harvest Development Group. And we're very fortunate today to be with LaRita Jarvis, who is a behavioral scientist down in Southern Florida. And LaRita's topic today will be Lead by Example, 3 simple tips to authentically guide teams through tough times, which is definitely, I think, what we're all facing now. And I know that one of LaRita's quotes that she lives by is, what matters most is how we treat each other, especially when we disagree. And I think that we've seen a lot of disagreement currently in this environment. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation, LaRita. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Scott. I'm so grateful to be here. It definitely is my passion project, and not because, even though my background is behavioral science, I don't come at this from a perspective of being an expert and being really great at disagreeing. It's actually because I've failed so miserably at it throughout my life that I've sought out some tools to get better. And so that's some of what I want to share today. And you're right, there's so much opportunity for disagreement right now. And it's just a very high stress environment for all of us. And so we're all really taxed. The things that we would do maybe easily and in an ordinary day-to-day situation, we don't really have the same energetic resources to go there. And so hopefully today we can share some things that may inspire people to have some deeper connections and hopefully spread some more contagious compassion. That's my mission in life.
That'd be great. And we were also talking about, you being down in Southern Florida, and really that region is used to, because of hurricanes and other issues, used to this crisis mode, when a lot of us in the rest of the country really have not lived through something like this. So it really has affected how we're acting and how we're behaving, but also how we're leading.
Yeah, absolutely. And, leaders aren't just managers and executives and people who run organizations. We're all leaders in our homes, in our families, in our communities. And so how we show up really matters. And you're right, there is a lot of benefit to going through challenges because it builds resilience. And so while I don't mean in any way to dismiss the challenges that people are facing, they're real. And there's a lot of suffering in the world. And I think it is up to each one of us of how do we find something that matters, something that we can pull from this to give us some meaning, and maybe even to benefit our lives and those around us. Because otherwise, there's suffering without meaning, without purpose. And it's really easy to go down that slippery slope, like you said, of just, when we're in crisis, of when is it ever going to get better? And that can become really hopeless. And that's hopefully what we can do today, is kind of connect with people and see where they're at. So before we dive in, Scott, how are you feeling?
Me? Really, it's interesting. I think it really changes every day. Yesterday we had, up here in New England, we had this crazy storm that came through with 60-mile-an-hour winds and rains and basements flooding and things like that. And that really put me in a dark mood in a way. Today it's sunny, and and it really, and thank goodness the sunshine really does brighten it up. So I think it really depends on, I think my feeling is trying to stay busy is the most important piece to making sure that I'm okay myself. And so I'm trying to stay busy and trying to think about not only what's going on in front of us and being mindful of that, but also thinking down the road. And that's really how I'm trying to survive through all of this.
Yeah, that's a great coping mechanism. There are a lot of people who share that. They feel like when they're busy, it really helps them cope and deal with stress. And like all of us, our coping mechanisms, there are superpowers and they're also our kryptonite. Yeah. So when we get to that point where we're overworking and we're busy for the sake of being busy, and we can kind of check out of other things, that's hopefully what we'll tap into a little bit today. And I really wanted to start with that question because for me, when people would ask me how I'm doing or how I'm feeling, I used to always say, great, it's great, everything's great. And sometimes it was, but a lot of times I was just putting on a face. I was putting on a mask. And that really distanced me from others. And I didn't fully understand, like most things, like you're saying, until things really kind of blow up in our life, or right now it's happening for all of us collectively. I didn't really understand that was keeping me from building trust and connecting with people that I wanted to have an impact with. Whether I was with it was my coworkers or people that I was leading on a team, I couldn't really establish trust with them without being really authentically honest about how I was feeling. And interestingly enough, for me, I call it the gifts of trauma. So many years ago, probably like 15 years ago, I found myself in a situation where I was not great, I was not good, I wasn't even fine. And so I kept answering the question a little differently, like, I'm okay. And I realized people pretty much responded the same way. And then I'm like, I'm fine. People still respond. I'm like, I'm not good at all. Like, I'm terrible today. People still responded the same way. So for me, it was this gift of realizing, like, if I'm putting this mask on, this face of like everything's okay, I'm not really doing it for them. It's right. They're pretty much fine with however I show up. It was something that I was doing to cope, like I said, and it wasn't a healthy coping mechanism. And so I think that's one of the things that's important to share too, is like, how do we get authentic about our feelings and just share those? And then that's a really important first step, because the next step is, what kind of support do we want? Really asking ourselves that question. And so I'll just ask you, Scott, right now at this time, like, what support do you want? I mean, is it toilet paper? Is it a hug? Like, I know we may not be able to give it to you, but just speaking about it would be amazing. What kind of support do you feel like you want right now?
Yeah, to be honest, I think the most support would be just knowing, and we might not have an answer, but knowing when this is all going to end,
Yeah,
so we can at least have some sort of target that we're looking towards, some sort of date, something that will give us something to work towards. I think that would
right.
be really helpful for me. Um, let's see. I also, what are some great, who should I be listening to right now? I think is another resource I'd love. Whose voice should I be listening to? Is it, national or state leaders? Is it someone in comedy, or, who would be a good voice to listen to get through this in a successful, healthy way? How about
Yeah.
you? So what are some things that you're looking for?
Those are some great, curious questions. I love where you're at with that. Yeah, for me, I think, like all of us, a little bit of certainty, and
Yeah.
even realizing that it may not be available. I think just being able to ask for it out loud, there's a little bit of a sense of relief of like, hey, I might not get it, but boy, it would be amazing. And I'm not a runner by any stretch of the imagination, but in my previous life, when I was in college, I worked a couple summers for the Bureau of Land Management as a wildland firefighter. And so one of the things our team would do, we would go out running together. And man, that was tough for me. And so one of the girls on our crew, she was a runner. She was a long distance runner, and she would teach me how to look. She's like, just look at that tree. Don't look at where we're going, the whole track. Just look at that next tree. And so, yeah, for me, I think having people around me who can help me just look at what is the next milestone, what is the next baby step, and bring me back, because I get overwhelmed too. I've had days that are really dark, and just complete sadness, and I just feel like I can't even do anything. Like, I'd want to work and feel useful, but it feels like just completely overwhelmed. And so yeah, the voices that we listen to, I think, in who's inspiring us, whether it's our family, our friends, a comedian. I'm a huge fan of using comedy to spread knowledge,
Yeah.
because it kind of gets through some of those other things, right? And then as a scientist, it's so important to me to check our sources, to not use one individual source and rely on that. We have to go looking for information that disproves what we think or believe. And so that's been really helpful to me, just my practice using the scientific method in my life of, well, the only thing we can be really sure about are the things that are not true. And so going out and really checking a lot of different sources, because like you said, otherwise it's easy for me. One of the things that I cope in a way of what am I passionate about? Where do I feel like I'm adding value? And so where that becomes my kryptonite is becoming really like overly skeptical. So again, I really have to watch, I have to balance those two things of where am I, what voices am I going to for inspiration? And then, am I really looking at a lot of different information to try to take things in and process it logically so that I can understand realistically? Because I think for a lot of us, we want to get through this quickly, and we also want to have realistic expectations so that we don't set ourselves up to go over that cliff of hopelessness when it doesn't come to fruition.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, yeah, the third thing for me when I went on this, journey and realized I have to like start being honest about how I feel just for me, let alone to be able to connect effectively with other people. And then, I really went about looking for support. I had some great tools at that time in my life, but I also went looking for some additional ones. So I'd been using the process communication for quite a while then. And we've been talking around that a little bit about how people cope differently. And those are really predictable things. And so having used the process communication model, I could really see my own distress signals. And I was aware of when I was coping in unhealthy ways. The uncomfortable part about that is I couldn't always intervene on my own behalf. So I could watch it and I could see that it was happening and I could see that I was messing up my relationships. But sometimes I still really struggled in order to, how do I recover when I see that, I've slipped into some of these unhealthy coping mechanisms. And so one of the many resources of support I sought out over time was this model called, the book is called Conflict Without Casualties. And so it was created by Next Element. And it's really a model for healthy conflict. And so we've been using it here for those really astute listeners and watchers. We've already covered the first two of their three steps. And I'll go over them again. So we've covered, being honest and open about how you're feeling. And that takes courage, because for a lot of us leaders, we've been kind of taught to be like, no, put on the brave face, like look like you have it all together. Yeah. And then the next thing is just really being curious about, what else is out there and, what else is possible. And again, that can be very challenging for many of us as leaders, because again, there's the temptation to show up with answers and solutions rather than a curiosity for what does the team, like what else is available in the team? What are their ideas? And many leaders are already very good at that, because they're, especially in the nonprofit world, I feel like they're exceptionally skilled at that because they're used to getting buy-in with very little resources.
Sure.
And so it's maybe just a reminder that these are skills that we already have that we can tap into. That's what makes them simple, but I don't mean to imply that they're necessarily easy to practice in stressful crisis situations. And the third one is again, kind of bringing us back to trust. It's about how we build trust is not just about being open and honest about how we're feeling and listen to other people's feelings openly and without judgment. The third item is really about being very clear about what we're willing to do and what we're not willing to do. And so for me in my personal journey, when I kind of went through really a meltdown in life, and it was one of the best things that ever happened to me, although it did not feel like that in the time, because it helped me get very clear on where my boundaries were. And that's kind of how I got to the point of having a meltdown. I was trying to help everyone else. Meanwhile, I hadn't started with the one person that I have the most impact on. And as leaders, I think this is something we can be challenged with, especially in stressful times, is understanding how important our own self-care is right now. If we're going to show up for other people, we have to get really exceptional at taking care of ourselves, because no one can pour from an empty cup. And so clarifying our boundaries, what are we willing to do and what are we not willing to do? And then being consistent with that is another way we really build trust within our teams.
That's great. So I think, a lot of us during this COVID period of distress or panic or whatever you want to call it, really want to be there for everyone and support everyone. And so when a client or someone comes to us at Harvest and says, can you help us? Our first initial reaction is, yes, what do you need? When and so I think, being honest and building that trust to see there are going to be times when we're not going to be able to help everyone. And being able to say, I guess actually being able to feel comfortable saying no is
Right.
a good skill to work on maybe during these periods, because I think, after this, we're still going to have those same skill sets.
It's a long recovery period, and like you said, we don't really know when the recovery is even going to start because we're just in it right now. And I'm so grateful that you shared that story and that example, because it's exactly why we titled this Leading by Example, because it really is sometimes the best things that we can do for others is to show up with those healthy boundaries and show them that it's okay. It's okay to say no. And so I'd love to share an example of what this might sound like using the compassionate accountability model.
That'd be great.
Um, yeah, absolutely. Because I do think it's something we're all challenged with right now, especially many of us who are transitioning to work from home who weren't used to working from home before. And I feel very fortunate that it's something that I've been doing for years, because I've learned that it's really easy to just work and work and work when you're working from home. Where's the separation between our personal life and our professional life? And I used to joke with clients who are like, that must be amazing working from home. And I said, well, yes. And it really depends on how many days in a row you've been working in the same set of pajamas.
Right. I've learned that I think I am looking forward to my commute time, to being in the car, listening to the radio, and having that time to take my home hat off and put my work hat on and be in the mode. So when I walk into the office, I'm ready for work. And then the reverse, at the end of the day, taking the work hat off in the car, putting the home hat on. And so when I walk in the door, I'm ready to be at home and have decompressed from work. And so I'm not getting that half hour transition period.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating when, we go without something that would have been really easy to take for granted before, and now that the commute is, 10 steps
Right.
and you're
Right.
back into the family, it's really amazing to see how we'd already organized our lives in a way, really without even probably putting too much conscious thought into it, but we had already worked it into a way that we're getting our needs met. And now all of us collectively are in a situation where it's more difficult to get our needs met. So for me, working from home, I just arranged a lot of meetings, a lot of coffee dates. I would meet over lunch or in the evening. And so that's just not, it's not available anymore. And so we're all having together to kind of restructure what are our new boundaries. And so for you, Scott, I'm not going to pretend like I know what your boundaries are. So I'm going to let you jump in after. I'll give you an example of what it might sound like to say no using the compassionate accountability model. And then I'll give you the opportunity to tweak it, because again, we're all different. So even though the tool itself is really relatively simple, it's not always the easiest thing to tap into deeper and deeper levels of truth within us. And that's the thing when I work with clients, it's really about getting beneath the surface level. So using the right words is one thing, but for me, if there's not like a little butterfly in your stomach, especially when we're dealing with a situation that's really important and impactful, we're probably not getting to the truth of the matter. So if we just take, for an example, the situation with a client who calls, and starting with how you're genuinely feeling of like, oh my goodness, like I really want to support you and be there for you, and I'm really struggling balancing my personal priorities, and what other times can we meet and get together. And then we get consistent and clear with our healthy boundaries, and we say, right now I'm going to tune out work so that I can be with my family. I'll be available tomorrow morning. And so we give people some options there. And it's really not about them. It's really about clarifying our boundaries for them, so that when they answer that curious question, we've kind of told them, okay, when else would you like to meet? I'm available within these times. And that's one simple example. How would it resonate with you? And how do you think that might work with some of your requests that are coming in?
No, I think that's great. A lot of, and plus I like to do a little research and before I talk to a client to understand maybe what their world looks like. What type of nonprofit do they do they run? What, are they in the arts? Are they in social services? So I'd like to schedule time, and then I can really give them full attention, as opposed to when the phone just rings and I pick it up, then I might have my mind on something else. So I think that's a good way to be mindful when I'm with that client, as opposed
Yes.
to being caught off guard, and then it does take some time to get that hat on that gets me into the mode of helping and listening, so I can help that client.
Absolutely. And that's part of self care, right? Understanding how we work best. Some of us are amazing at just jumping right into action. And for some people, that's their way of coping. And so now that we're trying to help everyone get their needs met at the same time, we have to be really clear about what works best for us. And so sometimes people have an idea that healthy conflict is always, kind of a negative thing. And it's not. Conflict is really just a gap between what we want and what we're experiencing. So when the phone rings and you want to be prepared for a client call, there's just a gap. It's not positive or negative. It's really how we respond to it that changes the situation. It's really how we're doing it, not necessarily what we're doing. And so another example of using this model, it would sound like, I'm so glad you called. Like, it's great to hear from you. I'm most comfortable having some time to prepare. What's your availability later on this afternoon? I'll carve out some time to look into your business so that we can make the most out of our phone call together.
Right.
That's
Excellent.
another, yeah,
That's an
yeah.
excellent example. Yeah. Though on the flip side, I also I do want, when someone calls, I was a kid who I love to go get the mail. I like to get information. And so
Yeah.
when I do get a call there, I do want to know what's going on and get that information. So sometimes it's an internal conflict that I've got to figure out.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Many of us have those. Many of us have more than one motivational need. And sometimes they're very competing needs, right? Our need for contact or social interaction, and it's fun and exciting. And then this time to prepare. And so a lot of times when we deal with interpersonal conflict, there's also that intrapersonal conflict. And sometimes there's statements that I just use with myself too. In this situation, if I was in your situation, it might be something of like, I'm excited to talk to this person. And I'm also uncomfortable because I don't have the background that I want to get there. Like, what are my options right now? And I'm just kind of coaching myself through it. And then I give myself my own, healthy boundary of like, okay, I'm willing to take the next 15 minutes until my next call to chat, provided that we set up a follow-up call before we get off.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that you brought that up. Yeah, conflict doesn't just happen between people, it happens within us. And I think many of us are experiencing those internal conflicts right now. Boy, for me, so much of my life is about supporting people in how do you want to show up? Who do you want to be in the world? How do you show up as your full self? And there's so much that's coming at me right now that I feel like there's times I'm just speechless, and I can't even begin to process some of the sadness and suffering that's happening in specific communities as well. There's definitely different ways that different communities are being impacted. And there's times that I've really had to coach myself of like, it's okay. It's not about showing up perfectly. It's just about recognizing like, wow, I didn't have anything to say in that situation because I was just so in my own feelings that I couldn't even express it. And then giving myself the opportunity, is there an opportunity to recover with that individual in the conversation and just come back and be authentic about it? Or is it just an opportunity to tell myself like, it's okay, like our best changes from day to day. And showing up as our best self isn't about meeting a certain standard all the time. It's about recognizing that our best will change from day to day. And if we let ourselves be okay, even when we make mistakes, especially when we make mistakes, it makes it easier for us to give other people the space and be compassionate with them when they're not showing up in the way that we might like or in the way that they might like.
Great. I just wanted to say we've got about 5 more minutes. We can go over, but I just wanted to keep us on track. If there was any, just to make sure you get an opportunity to
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I would love to just kind of break it down to make sure people walk away with something they can practice and apply, and
Excellent.
also encourage them. I know we're all getting used to more and more virtual interactions. So I know when you share the video, a lot of people will be watching this later on. Please still share in the comments. Let us know how you're feeling. Let us know what support you want and need right now. And also share what are your boundaries that you're clarifying. Sometimes just saying them out loud or typing them out loud can really help you get clear. And so I'll share the 3 steps that we're talking about. So the first one, I say when we're going to lead by example in order to guide our teams and the people we care about through tough times, the first step is be real. Um, and if it doesn't feel a little scary to be real, you're probably still at some kind of surface level. So like get uncomfortable and be real with people. This is the time to do it because we're all going through this together. And we always were, but I think we understand now in a different way how much our choices and our actions really do impact one another. So be real about how you're feeling, be, authentic and honest about what you're struggling with. And then the second step is to get curious. So be real, get curious. And curiosity is really about getting out of our own way in leading. And this happens in families and homes a lot, right? Like we show up and we want to have a solution and we want to fix it. And that is not curiosity. So beware of the statements that are masquerading as questions. Like if you hear yourself saying something like, "Why are you doing that?" That's not getting curious. Curiosity is like, how can you help me? What else is possible here? What other options do you see? So, yep, be real, get curious, and then stay consistent. And the third one about staying consistent, it's not about being perfect. It really just is about coming back over and over to the boundaries that you've clarified, either for yourself or your teams. And for teams, that's really important. They want to know, like you said earlier, like what can we expect? It's tough to navigate when we don't know what to expect. So the more clarity we can give people, the better off we'll all be together. And sometimes that is just personal clarity. Sometimes it's team boundaries of, hey, you know what? I'm not going to email you past 6 p.m. And, you're welcome to do emails at whatever time works for you. I'm just going to hold this boundary because I want to honor that you need to have some work-life balance during this time. So be real, get curious, stay consistent. There's a great book for people who are interested in learning more about these tools. It's called Conflict Without Casualties. It's
Yep.
written by Dr. Nate Regier. Somebody that I just adore. He has a very authentic voice, and the whole team at Next Element, they really live their tools. They really, walk their talk on a daily basis. And so it's a great book. I think it's easy to relate to. And he also has some great blogs out there. If you go to next-element.com, he has some great ways of how to practice compassionate accountability as well. And then for people who are looking for support, like, I just want to let you know, like, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Like, trust me, I've messed it up in every possible way. So there's no wrong way to start trying to build your skills in these areas. And if you feel like you're struggling, it's okay. You're not alone. You can always reach out through the comments section in this video. You can reach out to me. Instagram is a great way. You can find me at Ask LaRita Jarvis, or you can email me at asklarita@laritajarvis.com. So lots of different ways for us to get support, even if they're just curious questions. Even if you're trying to practice this tool with your team and you just want a little feedback, reach out to us. That's why we're here today, is to just share what we have and see how we can support each other.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure spending a half an hour with you. And I'm going to take a lot of these 3 points to heart. But I think it's great to get some resources like this to focus in on and really learn and think about how we're acting and responding in this difficult time.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's really, I think, important to me to share that message, is how we're doing something is often as important, if not more important, than what we're doing. So
Absolutely.
how we're showing up in the world matters.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time and all this advice. And I'm sure we'll be working together hopefully down the road. So thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much, Scott. Stay
All right.
safe.
You too. Take care.
Thanks.